Each month we look at a particular power, one of the 12 powers, and this month the power is understanding. Understanding is signified by the color gold. And understanding, one of the things we'll be looking at today is understanding how we all belong, how we are all interconnected, we're all part of one another. Understanding that individual differences that show up are not things that separate us from one another, but rather are wonderful things that contribute to the fullness and beauty of life. That God is so infinite and so broad that there is an infinite amount of variety and characteristics that come up in our world. And so each and every one of us are an outpicturing of that. And when we understand that, it shifts our world. It shifts how we view things. When I understand that you are the presence of God looking back upon me, then it shifts my understanding of how this world is put together. Now we're going this month also to be having Metaphysical Movie Month. And so I'll be speaking on 3 different movies. I'll be speaking today on Green Book, and next Sunday I'll be speaking on The Matrix, one of my favorite metaphysical movies. And then on the last Sunday of the month, I'll be speaking on The Greatest Showman. And we'll be looking at metaphysical truths, spiritual truths. Scripture teaches us spiritual truths, and movie, literature, and poetry has a lot of spiritual truths in it. And so we'll be seeing some of these spiritual truths that come through these movies. On the 3rd Sunday of this month, Reverend Medora will be speaking on a movie entitled Kinky Boots. So, all right. So there's going to be a lot of diversity in these movies, and this particular movie, Green Book, is about, I believe, belonging. Many of us grew up feeling like we did not belong, like we were somehow odd or different. Now, you might have been one of those lucky people who grew up feeling like you always belonged. All right, Clayton. And you might have been one of those people who never felt like you didn't fit in, that you were somehow a misfit, you know. But a lot of us have at times felt like misfits. It might be because of our political views. It might be because of our ethnicity. It might be because of the way we talk. It might be because... let me stop there. I remember going to a workshop where I was going to Menninger Clinic in Topeka, Kansas, to do an intensive workshop on group psychotherapy. I was working in psychiatry, and we were doing object relations theory in group dynamics. And there was a young woman in that group who had never met me before. And she said, "I don't like you. I don't like the way you look. I don't like the way you act. I don't like the way you talk." Have you ever just felt like you didn't fit in? That particular reading that I led with, you know, I debated, do I read this or not? Do I push the envelope a little? I remember when I was in Nazarene Theological Seminary, and one of the first invitations I had to come somewhere and speak was at a very, very Southern Baptist church. And so I chose to speak on Black liberation theology. That went well. So all of us have unique things that we bring to life. You know, regardless of our sexual orientation, regardless of, you know, I remember working at Nazarene Publishing House, and one of the people who worked there just looked at me completely serious and said, "You are so weird." Why are you so weird? And I'm thinking, I'm just being who I am, Have you ever felt that way, like you didn't fit in? And maybe you grew up with some rules or some programming about how you were supposed to act, what you could or couldn't do, where you could or couldn't go, what was proper or improper. Some of us grew up with more of that than others. My mother may be watching. I love you and I miss you. And in our particular culture, there were a lot of things we couldn't do. There were a lot of things we could. There were a lot of things we couldn't do. And there were a lot of places we weren't supposed to go. And so there were these rules. Think of it like a travel guide for life. And so at an early age, I felt like I was being given a travel guide. This is what you can and can't do. This is where you can and can't go. So as we do a metaphysical interpretation of Green Book, think of the Green Book as symbolizing that rules of the road, your travel guide. Now, the Green Book was used by those who were black to know where they could stay at a hotel, where they could eat at a restaurant, how they could travel without tons of conflict. We have a clip. Let's show this clip that helps explain what the Green Book is about. We are looking at differences, apparent differences. Many of us think that there's differences that separate us, so it's still a very current topic. Many of us feel like if someone is Muslim, if they are Jewish, if they are an atheist, if they are transgender, whatever, we think, oh, there's something other, there's someone different than us, and therefore separate. But they're not. We are all one. We are all one family. Now, I want to explain a little bit, and I got some feedback from the first service. I think I had assumed a lot of people had seen the movie. And then I realized, I need to explain a little bit more. So, Dr. Donald Shirley, he is a black gentleman. He is a concert pianist. And true story, he was classically trained to play. He was playing piano by the age 2. By age 18, he was playing with the Pop Symphony. I mean, very gifted person. And what he found out was that as a black musician, it was difficult to be accepted for playing classical music because people did not see how a black person could be playing classical music. Yeah. So their own prejudice led to the record company saying, okay, you need to change your style of music a little bit. He started doing some combination of classical with jazz themes. So it was a fusion. He came up with his own genre. And he was wanting to travel through the South. And what comes out later in the movie was he wanted to travel in the South and play because he thought by doing that, his music might affect the hearts of people, might help shift the mindset of people, because it's hard for us to shift if we stay in a silo. It's uncomfortable to get out of the silo. It's awfully easy to believe that you know everything when you're in the silo. But when you engage with other cultures, different races, different faith backgrounds, you find out, oh, there's other ways of doing things. There's other ways of seeing things. It's one of the reasons I like to travel. I like to experience perspective from other traditions and people. And it challenges my own thinking. Now, this is very spiritual. In unity, we call this chemicalization. Chemicalization is when reality or truth confronts programming and an older belief system. And it sometimes creates friction, sometimes creates irritability. On an individual basis, or in a nationwide or whole world basis. There might be one thing all of us here would agree on. Would everyone here agree that there's a significant amount of friction in our country? Metaphysically, I would interpret that as chemicalization. We're confronting who we are and what are we really about and what do we stand for. Who are we going to be? And so in this movie, Doc Shirley needs a driver, and not just a driver, not just a chauffeur. He interviews people and he ends up interviewing Tony Lip, Tony Vallelongo. Tony Lip is a bouncer at this point. And I did a lot of research on this, and it turns out a lot of these things are true, even according to Doc Shirley on audio clips and so forth. But Tony Lip was a bouncer at the Copacabana. So in the interview, Doc Shirley brings him in to interview him and says, so tell me what you do at the club. He says, well, I'm in public relations. And it turns out to be a very valuable skill to have as they are traveling through the South together. Now, Doc Shirley says, do you have any problems working for a black man? Now, Tony Lip needs a job. He's like, no problems. But Tony Lip is very, very prejudiced. Just before that, there had been some black plumbers over at his house, and his wife was very gracious and hospitable and had given them drinks. Tony Lip sees the glasses that they had drank out of, and he throws them away. She comes in later and opens the trash and sees them there and just shakes her head, takes them back out. Later, towards the end of the movie, you see how much he has shifted because of his relationship. So this is about two people, really, who are being saved, if you will, by their connection, by their relationship, by being in close proximity with each other. We're all needed. We all belong. But sometimes we get these messages that somehow we don't. Somehow we're different. And we wonder if we belong, if we have a place here. On one occasion, Doc Shirley and Tony Lip, driving through the South, go through a sundown town. Some of you are familiar with sundown towns? A lot of you aren't. Okay. Sundown towns were towns where if you were black, you could not be out in public after sundown. This is in the lifetime of most of you. I mean, one of the most prominent and well-known Unity ministers, Johnny Coleman, who was black, when she was going to seminary at Unity Village, had to make sure that she got home by sundown. It wasn't that long ago. So they're driving through this suntown area. Tony Lip doesn't know about that. He's not had to deal with that before. And some policemen stop them, and one of the police officers is harassing them and calling them nasty things. Tony Lip, he belts the officer, knocks him flat. They end up in jail. Go figure. And that leads up to this next scene. So it's about standing in your truth, knowing who you are here to be, not to be violent, not to be forcing others, but holding your dignity. It's hard to hold your dignity when others are doing very indignified things to you. Perhaps you've been there. You know, this last month was the 50th anniversary of Stonewall. Stonewall was a place in New York City where those who were gay, transgender, transvestite felt safe. And there was an unexpected raid. And for the first time, they stood up and said, no, we are not going to go along with this. We are going to stand up to you. And it started a movement. Who have we not invited to our table? Who have we not invited in our lives? Who have we separated ourselves from, thinking that they are the other? All of us know what it feels like probably at some point to be rejected in our lives. All of us at some point in our lives know what it feels like to be ostracized, to be diminished, to be minimalized, to be on the outskirts. And if you don't, I'm sorry. It's something worth feeling. Because it gives you more compassion for those who do experience it, and it helps you to define who you really are. In this next scene, we're going to see Doc Shirley, who in the movie sometimes is struggling with who he is. We're going to see him really standing in his truth about who he is and how he wants to be treated. Learning who we really are and learning to stand in our truth is an important spiritual principle of life. Learning that we do belong. Each and every one of us belongs. But many of us have often felt like we didn't. I remember growing up in a wonderful church tradition, Church of the Nazarene. Many of those concepts I still carry with me. They're a part of me. But I never completely felt at home there. And I used to wonder, what's wrong with me? They seem like nice people. Why don't I fit in? I mean, there were maybe several reasons. You know, we learned this song as a child. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Red and yellow, black and white, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. And then I would hear leaders in the church say derogatory things about people of different races or different faith traditions. And I was trying to put it together. Jesus loves all the little children, but we don't? I mean, there were things that didn't make sense. I didn't quite understand also how a God who was defined as love could also send for eternity people to a lake of fire. I thought, what? You know, when I became a father, there's nothing my son could do that would ever lead me to want to send him to an eternal lake of fire. There's nothing my worst enemy could do that would cause me to want to do that. Am I better than God? And I wondered that as a kid. There were things that didn't quite ring true. One theologian said, beware of anything that a church teaches that doesn't make sense to a child. Because children don't have all those defenses. They don't see all those differences, those distinctions, you know, of race or differently abled or gender identities. We're just all one. We're all one people. And yet, as Doc Shirley experienced in this, he was not welcome, even though he was the person of honor, even though he was a classically trained musician, even though he had a degree in psychology, even though he was this very educated person, he was not welcome there because of his color. And most of those people who supported that action were Christian. Most of the people who supported slavery were Christian. Most of the people who supported subjecting women, making them subject to domination, were Christian. Sometimes we don't have a very good track record. Jesus speaks to us as strongly today as ever. Jesus prayed in John, Father, make them one. Help them to see that they are one, that we are one with one another. 2,000 years later, we still don't get it, but we call ourselves by His name? What a sham. That's why I chose to talk about it in that very, very Southern Baptist church, but I thought, okay, I need to think in the future about the audience I'm speaking to. Do you know that we all belong Do you really know that? When you get up in the morning, when you look at yourself in the mirror, do you realize you belong? That your unique gifts, your unique experience, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, you belong. We need you. There was a time in my life, my mom may be watching this, why I choose to confess things in church that I've never told my mom is beyond me. Is that smart? Anyway. So there was a time in my life where I was going through divorce, where I felt terribly isolated and terribly alone. Didn't know where I fit in. Church no longer felt safe. Some of the people from the church had been terrible and judgmental. I didn't know where I belonged. I went to places trying to feel better, places that ministers don't typically go. And one of the better of those places was a blues bar. Love blues. I love jazz. I love blues. And I don't drink, but at that time I did. I drink scotch straight up. I'd put my feet up on the table and just kick it back and listen to the blues. And as weird as it sounds, that was more church to me than anything I had found at that point. Because I could be myself, and others were welcome the way that they were. And I thought, why couldn't church be somewhere where we are honored and celebrated? What a frickin' concept. So somebody invites me to Unity. I'm not saying we're better than others, but I'm telling you, as soon as I walked in, I was not just welcomed, I was celebrated. The differences that I brought, my unique perspective, were valued. I didn't have to talk like everybody else. I didn't have to dress like everybody else. Who I was valued because I was seen as the presence of God, just as each and every one of you are. You are the presence of God. And I was elated. I thought, wow, there's a church that actually teaches this. Then I found out it's their second great principle, the divinity of humanity, because we're all the outpicturing of God. I was elated, and then I was pissed. Why isn't this out? Why don't people know about this? Everybody's invited to the party. Everybody's invited to it. That's why I'm so passionate about outreach. I want everybody to have the same opportunity I had to discover there is such a thing as real community that embraces us just as we are, that loves us, a place where we belong. It's so fun when you find that place where you feel safe. And really, we can feel that anywhere, but initially it really helps to have a supportive environment where we know it's good to be who I am, and it's good for you to be who you are. So in this next scene, now they mentioned in the dining room scene, that was the country club at Birmingham, the last stop of the tour. He mentioned the Orange Bird. The Orange Bird is a bit of a dive just down the street, and they end up going there to eat. Dr. Shirley has not played. He's used to playing for people. He's used to playing for money. But he discovers something at the Orange Bird. In this scene, as I watched the movie, for the first time you see him really happy. Where he's playing not for money, but because he loves it. Let's see this. It's good when we can come into our own, when we can let our wings open and we can fly. Do you know the feeling? Do you know the feeling of breaking free and really expressing what you really are, your dreams, what you really are? Now, one of the archetypes, an archetype is a theme, a universal theme that you can find in all religions, all traditions. And one of the archetypes I look for in movies are communion scenes. That's what my term for them. You see it in older movie like Places in the Heart with Sally Fields, where everybody comes together of all colors and stripes, even those who've been murdered. They all come together for communion at the end. You see it in different movies depicted in different ways of people coming in. It's a belonging scene. It's a statement, a spiritual truth that we all belong, that we're all invited to the party. Did you know you're invited to the party? Did you know you're invited to the table? I remember, I was very involved as a leader in the Catholic Church, and my priest, Father Mike, when I was becoming a Unity minister, I said to Father Mike, am I still invited to the communion table? I'll never forget his answer. Tim, whose table is it? Of course you're invited. Look who is inviting you. We're all invited to belong. Early in the movie, when black workers had been in the house, Tony Lip had thrown their glasses away. In this next scene, you'll see how much has changed because he was willing to be open, because he was willing to let his life be affected, because he was willing to let reality confront him. You'll see how his wife responds when, in the movie, one of his family members calls Doc Shirley a derogatory term, a term that was used, it's Italian slang that was used in the Chicago area. And Tony says, don't call him that. And they can see there's a difference that has come through. He's a different person. Now that person who in the scene uses that term is actually the son of Tony Lip in real life. And in another scene in the movie, there's a gangster named Augie who's trying to get Tony Lip to work for him. That's another son of Tony Lip who wrote the screenplay. They depict themselves in some ways that are not altogether complementary. But they wanted to prove a point, how much you can shift. How much you can shift if you'll open yourself to life. So, what I call a communion type scene is a Christmas scene. This is happening during Christmas. And so, at one point, Tony Lip, in order to get enough money for the rent, pawns one of his watches to get $50, and he's told, if you return and pay me $60 by New Year's, then you can get the watch back. Otherwise, it goes on for sale. And the pawn dealer is Charlie and his wife Marie. So you'll see them pop up in this scene. Because everyone's invited. All of us are. Someone in the first service said they couldn't understand what she said, but she said, thank you for helping him with the letters, because she had told him to write frequently. And this is true. So Doc Shirley helped him with writing these letters, and they turned into the most romantic letters ever, which she loved, but she also figured he was having some help. How much we benefit when we know that we all belong, when we all know that we're part of this. You know, I think of in the Bible, Revelation chapter 3, verse 20, where Jesus says, behold, I stand at the door and knock, and if anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and dine with them, and they with me. Are we open? Are we open to see that presence of God in ourselves and in all people? Do we know that we all truly belong, that you belong, that you're needed? Whatever your background, whatever your political stripe, you are loved, you are valued, and you belong. Thank you.